The following presentation is part of the Beyond the Blast Doors network.
Michael, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm really excited to get the opportunity to talk to you. For those who may not know, Michael is one of the authors in The Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View. And Michael, maybe tell us a little bit about your background as a writer.
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me say first, in case I didn't say it before, but thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Glad we were able to connect. This is great. So yeah, I mean, I think my background as a writer, that's such a robust story. I'll tell my background as a Star Wars writer, I guess. That'll be
yeah. Well, you've done some really amazing, like you've done one-offs for Stranger Things. You've done a bunch of original comics and books and things, right? So that's cool. But yeah, let's start with the Star Wars and see where it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as soon as storying for Star Wars is something I always want to do. It's one of, if not my very favorite thing in this world. Definitely my favorite pieces of fiction. I've been a fan since I was a kid, and I remember this profound moment in my life when I was at a mall with my mom, and I was at probably like a B. Dalton bookstore and saw this Timothy Zahn, the Heir of the Empire. They had this display that was up in the store, and I just could not believe it. I hadn't seen the daily stuff. There's a few books out prior to Zahn. He was the first Star Wars author, but sure. It was like the biggest. It was such a landmark and a marquee event because he was continuing the story, post Return of the Jedi, and that was such a big deal. And I remember seeing that, and I was like, just blown away. Not that the story was continuing, and I was blown away for that, but I was blown away because Star Wars is going to live in books now, and I was such an avid reader. I was an avid movie watcher too, and I had seen the movies a billion times at that point, but it's such an avid reader too that this just opened up a whole world to me, and I was just like, I want to do this so badly. And many years passed, and then I remember when Disney got the rights, to Lucasfilm, to Star Wars and everything. I remember shortly after that, IDW announced that they were going to do the Star Wars Adventures line for kids. Mm-hmm. And being a dad, I was like, not only was I very enthusiastic about that, but I was like, I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it's going to take. I was writing, for some context, I was already writing comics at the time. I think I had written some, DC stuff, my original stuff. I certainly worked for Boom and a few other people's. I forget where exactly that falls in the timeline, but I was a published comics writer, so I was like, I'm going to get to this place. And around that same time, I had my first novel published, which is this novel called Black Star Renegades, which is space adventures, basically a Star Wars ripoff.
Right. George wanted to write Flash Gordon, you wanted to write Star Wars, so you. Yes. Wow, you've really redeemed my theft in the best way that no one's done. That's why I'm here, Michael.
Thank you. Oh man, if I would have had you around a few years ago, we could have really marketed the hell out of that thing.
We'll get the sequel. We're working there for the sequel.
Yeah, right. So I remember then. Long story short, I had this book that was Star Wars adjacent. I had my comic stuff, and I remember basically hunting down people at IW and both Lucasfilm and just barking up that tree incessantly. I'm a pretty tough customer. I'm pretty relentless. if I, I'm a very calm and chill guy, but I'm relentless when I need to be in a very nice way, though. But so I got a hold of certain people, kept getting into my work, and showed them how passionate I was. Showed them my Star Wars tattoo, and passed the medal. And finally, I started working for the Star Wars Adventures comics, and I've been writing for them for about 2 years. And that got me embedded into the Lucasfilm family, so to speak. And they knew I so badly want to do prose as well, because again, this Zahn story is so part of my formative creative experience.
Yeah.
As a writer, just so inspirational and so again formative that they had this opportunity with The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, and they said, "Do you want to do something?" And I picked myself up off the floor and said, "Sure, let's do it."
That's great. And so the story that you wrote is called Beyond Hope, and I'll summarize it as lamely as as I do. It's essentially, you've
already proven better at me than doing this kind of stuff.
Well, it's the story of one of the soldiers that we see which is one of the things I love about the From a Certain Point of View books. Now, this is the second one, of course, that did A New Hope, is they take a character or an event and just sort of explode it and tell what happened at that moment. And yours is one of the rebel soldiers that's in the trenches as the walkers are coming, and the story of his time in the Battle of Hoth, and you bring a lot more to it. But did you come to them with the concept of, hey, I want to do a story about a soldier in the Battle of Hoth, or was it they said, here's 17 different options, what do you want to do? How does that process work?
It was the former. So they came to me, and I think it was a pretty wide open thing. I think they were like, some of the bigger obvious things were already taken. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't tell you what they were, but that was the first idea that I had. I think maybe I sent like 2 or 3 ideas, but that was my favorite and the most fleshed out. Mm-hmm. I've really been inspired. Like, some of the things that, if you're looking at, there's lots of good war stories from like the Legends line, but if we're looking at the new canon,
mm-hmm.
the novels that are canon now, I really love Alexander Freed's work. He did the Battlefront book, he did the Rogue One adaptation, and he's doing the Alphabet Squadron books now. Like, what are they called? I think it's just called Alphabet Squadron.
Yeah.
I haven't read the second one yet, but I love his book. I especially love Battlefront, where it just gave you this really cool look at basically the grunts on the ground of the rebellion. There's no force, there's no dashing scoundrels and smugglers and all that kind of stuff. It's just these troops from across the galaxy trying to win this. From their perspective, people who don't know the Force and don't know what's going on with Luke and Dagobah and all that stuff. This is a pretty unwinnable war, so it fascinates me. Like, I love that I love what Alexander opened up, and I kind of always I love a good military story. So I was like, what is it? My thinking was like, what are these guys? These people thinking, in this trenches of Hoth. You have blasters, you have enemies coming at you that you can't even penetrate. There's nothing those weapons do against an ATST or an AT-AT or any of those walkers. So what is that like? What is that like to be in this miserable frozen trench with death stomping your way?
Right. Yeah. And what I loved about it too is, and I'm not just here to say, hey, I read the story and I loved it. I mean, it was I'm actually, they picked a good person to send the book to, because it's one of my favorite books of the new Disney canon. Was the first From a Certain Point of View, because I just kind of, we grow up as Star Wars fans, and maybe this is one of the reasons why the Zahn book appealed to you, other than the fact that it was Star Wars on the cover. But Star Wars fans, so as I mentioned to you before, I saw A New Hope in the theaters at 7 years old, and I grew up with the action figures, and you grew up obviously with Star Wars as a core part of your entertainment. And we play with the toys, and we as children, I mean, I see my son with his Clone Wars, his Clone Troopers, and he's making up his own little worlds there, and to watch or to have that opportunity to expand on those, I think is great. And you also you took kind of a different angle as well, in that you reminded us that these guys, it's not an army fighting for a country or for a single planet. It's for an ideal, and that's a very different thing to fight for.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that's the thing that like I really wanted to key in on because, we've heard time and time again. I think this is really driven home in Rogue One. The whole like, rebellions are built on hope, but hope, while a very wonderful thing, is also a very challenging thing as well. Like it's hard to put that into really concrete terms. It's hard when you are, what are you hoping for? Like I said, from a certain perspective, and I want to do this with the main character, Iman, like he had seen already the power and destruction and the force of the Empire. Like he knows that they can utterly destroy you.
Right.
So it's hard to be hopeful to know like we can't win. And I wouldn't blame anyone for thinking that. I think that's a very pragmatic stance to have. Like, we can't win this. Hope is nice, but we are going to be destroyed, and, to try, dive into that and to learn what it is that you're fighting for, and not just like I don't know, call it a generic phrase, but it can become a generic phrase unless you really understand what the hope is for. And, that's what Iman has to do.
I think that's a really interesting point too, because I mean, Rogue One, of course, I mean, they hit you over the head with the concept of hope, right? I mean, right down to whether it was in the trailers or the CGI Leia, it was hope, and you get that as a concept, but to try to digest it as beyond the story, which of course, one of the things that I also find very interesting about a couple weeks ago, I had Kevin J. Anderson on, who I'm sure you read his books if you were reading Timothy's on, and just talking about how, you're telling it, you have this opportunity to tell the story from a different perspective. When you have 2.5 hours to tell it on film, you can sort of get the themes across, but to be able to, in a 12-page story from a certain point of view, you have to kind of quickly get to the point that you're trying to make in the story. Do you find it hard to write a short story? Or for myself, I enjoy writing a short story because I feel like I get in, I get out, but I also feel like there's times where as a writer, you want to expand on that idea. So how was that for you? What do you prefer to write?
It was very hard. I'm not a short story guy. I really struggle because like, it's so hard to kind of like, it's like I always say, you're like pushing a watermelon through a chain link fence, like it's just it's just not doesn't work. Yeah. I there's so many big ideas, and once I kind of got into this one and really kind of recognized, okay, this is what it's about, this is where Eamon's going to start, in this place where he's questioning what does hope mean and trying to be like, well, theory is great, concept is great, but practice is another thing,
right?
And where he ends, which I don't want to, obviously say.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, you can probably guess, but like, once I kind of got like, okay, here's where he begins, here's where he ends, and especially easy because the beats of what's going to happen in the story. I watched that Hoth trench scene about a trillion times, like of recording like everything that happens. Of like, okay, this is when this, a speeder goes down, and this is when this whatever, and getting that chronology. So you're like weaving it through this chronology that's already there. When do they retreat, etc. So that made it a little easier, but generally, like, I just find it so hard to write so narrowly like that, because I want to go off in all these different directions, and I want to make a full like I'm a very big structure person.
Yeah. When
I write, so I want to do a big complete 3-act arc, that each act does what it's supposed to do, and those kind of things, and to remove that. I mean, stories still have a structure to a degree, but it's a little less than a novel, and so removing that, I stumble hard when that happens.
Did you said you watched the scenes over and over and over again? Is there a particular guy that you saw that you're like, that's my Iman, that's my guy, or did we not see him on screen?
Yeah, I kind of did figure, because you see the moment, and I'm totally blanking on his name. I remember when you started talking about the story, there is one character that I name who's like Iman's commanding officer.
Yep.
And he's the guy who's above the ridge. He's got the macronoculars, and he has a name. I'm forgetting what it is.
Yeah.
But Iman would be like just down and across, like just like kind of adjacent to him is what and I saw him. I saw like kind of like that's where he would be. You know, I could kind of like yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And so now I was going to ask you how it feels to write canon Star Wars, but you had done it before in the Star Wars Adventure. I was going to call Star Wars Adventure Journal, which was something from West End Games back in the 90s. But the Star Wars Adventure Stories is how is the process? And obviously, you have a relationship with the story group because they're checking that stuff out. How is the process for this? Maybe that's a better way to put it, because it is already connected to well-known canon. Now, obviously, the story group probably pays also as much attention to things that almost nobody knows about, but they know about. But since you're writing is something connected to a film that the majority of people I speak to call Empire Strikes Back their favorite film. How was it working with the story group to ensure that what you were writing was going to be, part of what they wanted to bring to life?
I've luckily kind of got a good rapport and rhythm with the story group through Star Wars Adventures. And so I kind of know like what not to do. I think that's the biggest thing is like knowing what not to do. Like it's tough to, we're so enthusiastic and we love it so much that like we want to take chances, Yeah. And I first started, I tried to take some chances. Like I'm going to try to do this big thing or that big thing. And they're always like, no. So I knew it's funny, and I know you had Mike Chen on here when he told me his story.
Yeah,
his Palpatine story. I was like,
yeah,
because we're buddies. We text all the time. He told me that what he was pitching, and I was like, sure. I was like, you go.
They're not going to give you that.
Right, and then he did. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I know to keep it safe, to try to keep it safe, keep it simple, they are, they're great. They always know, they're always the great guardians of the details that even, I'll tell you what, there was one detail even in Empire that I missed. I messed up. They were like, now I forget exactly what, but like I had a AT-AT Walker crashing. The one that we see crashing to the ground, they're like, no, that's too far away from the trenches. That doesn't work. And I was like, oh man, I didn't measure it. I don't know.
You envision like this giant basement in Skywalker Ranch where they have all the maps of everything. Right? No, that was 180. That was 186 meters away from the trench. There's no.
Yeah,
but that's cool though, because and now I got to ask, like, how important was that fact to your story? Did you have to like go back and be like, oh, I got to rework an entire concept, or was it just a detail that you were able to work around?
No, luckily they had a solution, because there's another AT-AT that crashes off screen. Okay. There's the one that Luke down. So originally I did the one that, or not off screen. I don't think we see it fall. Now I'm forgetting the details, but I was doing the one that Luke downs when he throws, the grenade up into, cuts it open.
Yep.
But what it ends up being is the one that the speeder crashes into.
Okay.
And I forget how much of that we see. So it actually, I had to just kind of rework the details of how that thing crashed and like positioning everything, and like kind of had to move the timeline around a little bit. But it wasn't too bad, and luckily they pointed that out, and it was an easy fix.
All right, that's good. That's good. I'm sorry, I'm nerding out all the details, because these are the questions that I would ask if I was getting the shit. And by the way, I have the perfect idea for From a Certain Point of View, Return of the Jedi, and I'm gonna follow your lead. I'm gonna bug him just enough so I can get in there and do it.
Do it,
but I got to do it. I told Mike this story, and I'll tell you really, really quick. I had, and listeners are sick and tired of hearing me say it probably, but I had written a short story for the Star Wars Adventure Journal, which is why I almost said it by accident. I don't know if you remember the Star Wars Adventure Journal. West End Games used to, with the role-playing game, quarterly, they had a paperback book, which was full of short stories, and then stats for new characters and things like that. And I had written a story, and I was going through the process and the editing, and it was literally supposed to go into the next Star Wars Adventure Journal when West End Games got out of Star Wars overnight. Like literally overnight. Like, pulled up the the tent and left town. And Jason Bryan actually talked about that because he was working on a story for them around the same time. So it was kind of funny. That's
heartbreaker.
It is. It's sitting in a manila folder on my desk in my office, and it just sits there and mocks me every now and then.
What is it about? Can you say?
Yeah. So the premise of the story was, it was an imperial. It's funny because in the 90s we didn't have all the same canon, of course, but when I read it, it still kind of works. It was the story of a Thai bomber pilot on a run, and as he's going over, he flies a little close and he sees the people on the street that he's bombing, and he suddenly questions everything he's doing. And it's almost like a Finn story in a way.
Yeah.
But he knows he doesn't want to be a rebel because he's seen too much of what they've done wrong in his opinion, but he doesn't want to be an imperial anymore. And so I had written it so that it would be sort of the beginning of multiple stories I could do about this guy. And he ends up joining a little pirate group, which turns out they're actually doing something for the rebels. It was a fun little story. I don't know where I was going with that, other than to just say I would love to be able to bring some of those kind of stories to life. But So one of the questions that I ask at the end of the interview in the 10 questions is, I'll ask it now and we'll just skim over it later. But where does Empire fall in your favorite Star Wars films?
It's the best. It's the best. It's the best movie ever made. Period.
So the opportunity to write something from it must have blown you away. I mean, you did say you were floored by the opportunity, but how do you react to being able to now contribute to your favorite movie of all time?
It was such a surreal thing because it was like a double moment that was so wild of like one achieving this goal and this dream of wanting to write Star Wars prose, and that's what and I don't want to diminish. I'm so grateful and lucky and thrilled and happy to be writing Star Wars comics, but it sort of started with prose for me. That's where it's like I said, that Zahn book. That's where it started. Mm-hmm. So I just couldn't believe it. I remember getting the email. I remember it was over the summer or spring or something. I forget when I was asked. I think it was like early summer or late spring. And I remember my kids and my wife were out. We open up the garage, like both sides. We have like one of those garages that have doors on both sides, and open it up, and they're playing out there, and they're just racing out there and just like telling them and freaking out. Like I was just so happy, and it's intimidating too, because it is my favorite. Because the first book, first of all, from a certain point of view book is so good, and so many amazing contributors, that alone is intimidating. Then you add on that it's this lifelong dream. Then you add on that it's for my favorite movie of all time. It's like, well, deep breath and let's see what we can do, and like maybe that's why I decided. Maybe that's why like I didn't do like the Mike Chen. I'm gonna go for a Palpatine pitch. I was like, I'm gonna go for that guy that nobody knows his name in the trench. He's just gonna see his story. Maybe that helped diminish the intimidation. But yeah, I mean, it was a thrill. It was a dream come true, and I couldn't believe. I still can't believe it. I can't wait to see the book. I can't believe it's coming out. I'm still kind of a pinch myself territory here.
Yeah, I mean, so when this interview drops, you'll be able to go over to Amazon if you're listening. You can go and order this book, and I can't recommend it enough. And it's funny, and I say that, and I feel like, oh, geez, here's the Disney shill guy. But the reality is, I love these. My biggest challenge is I love the novels, but I have a very short attention span, right? So now that we're quarantined and I'm not driving as much, I haven't been able to keep up as much with the novels because I usually listen to them. And I had Mark Thompson on the show, and that was a thrill for me because he is the voice of always be the voice of Thrawn to me, right? So, but just talking to him and hearing him tell his stories was fantastic. But the great thing about this is there's two really cool things about this book to me. One is they're short stories. So you have 20 minutes to kill. You pick up the book and you read a story or two. The second is it's introducing and intermingling both voices that we know, Jason Fry and Delilah Dawson, people who we've read in Star Wars before, and people like yourself, who it's your first foray into prose Star Wars, or somebody like Mike Chen or Brittany Williams, somebody who has written before, but you're getting a new taste. And so not only are you getting a new story, but you're getting a new taste. So how much interaction did you have with the other authors during the writing of the book, or was it sort of everybody was sort of freelance, independent, and submitted it and didn't really speak to others that much?
Yeah, it's more of like what you described. Like everyone's kind of just on their own, writing their stories. Luckily, the Del Rey team, Tom and Elizabeth, who are tremendous editors, are really great at shepherding, and I can't imagine the task it is to like put all these authors together and get them on the story and to weave this kind of narrative together of like, okay, we've got to cover. You can't front load it or back load it or whatever. You can only tell so many stuff that happens at Dagobah, et cetera. So you've got to spread out this thing. I get 40 really good ideas that cover the spread of this entire great film. So hats off to them for that achievement alone. But otherwise, no, it's just just us writers kind of going off on our own. Like I said, I talked to Mike and both of us, enjoying the process and sharing what we were doing and our excitement, and that question of like, beginning like, is the story, is this going to pass? I don't know, where what's going to happen. So we were able to kind of share that kind of excitement and anxiety and together. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the comics too. Like I think it's different at Marvel. I think maybe the writers who work over there have more contact to each other because they do a little bit more like crossovers, and it's kind of like they're weaving this big tapestry. But at IDW, we it's for kids. We do like maybe 2-issue arcs at most. Usually the issues are like one story and done. Mm-hmm. Unless it's like a special series, like I did the Clone Wars series, that was 5 issues. Oh, okay. That's a little bit like different from the regular line. So, it's the same thing. There's not a whole lot interacting there either. I think we see, when we used to go out, there used to be like a Lucasfilm or, whatever Star Wars events that I'd see. Alex Segura, who recently, he's a friend of mine, did the Poe Dameron book, or Delilah you mentioned, or Chuck Wendig, or whomever, Kevin Scott. There's so many great people in the Star Wars community. So I think we see each other, even though we don't really have that, like, we don't have much that we like discuss while we're working. Sure. There is still a good team camaraderie of everybody who works in the universe. That's really pretty cool once we do have the opportunities to draw our paths across.
And of course, I'll say it one more time, you are one of the 40 authors that bring pieces of that film to life from a different perspective, from a certain point of view. And in stores today, when this episode drops, I'm really excited to read more of it. I've read probably about 3/4 of it, and I've enjoyed it. So, Michael, where can people find you online and keep up with you and your goings on?
I'm on Twitter. I've been on, I was on a break. Then it's been a busy couple weeks with things going on in our country, so I've been a little bit off break. But like, I'm Michael Moreci at Michael Moreci on Twitter, at Michael Moreci on Instagram. I have a website, michaelpmoreci.com that I woefully don't update. I try, but at least you can contact me through there too. But I have a pretty reasonable online footprint. I feel like it's not too much, but I'm not. I do exist there, for better or worse.
Well, that's great. Good luck with the book and with the story. And are you still doing the Star Wars Adventure comics as well? Or
Yeah, issue number, we just relaunched it. Issue 2 comes out in a few weeks, and then I'm doing at least issues 3 and 4. I don't know after that. I know I have stuff, I just don't know when it comes in the series. But 3 and 4 will be great. It's Life Day stories, so
great.
People might be there for that. Awesome. It's Life Day, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, an adventure on Life Day. I don't know. What more could you want?
that sounds perfect to me. So
that's great. It's fun. It's gonna be
fun. Well, I'm dead serious. I am gonna have to put together a prequel show, and you and Mike Chen are gonna have to join me, and we'll have a blast with that. And this was so much fun. I could have kept you on for much longer, but I'll have you back if you'll come back.
Absolutely, yes, I love this, and thank you very much for having me, for being such a great host. This is super fun. I loved it, so thank you very, very much.